In this screencast, I want to have a quick look at title blocks. So I have just filmed the screencast on placing lanterns. So we've got a little bar here with a few bits of backlight on it. Some of you will have noticed that I have drawn the lanterns on the wrong layer. It's actually placed on the layer LX positions instead of the layer overhead LX because I did not activate the layer overhead LX when I was drawing these. So that's easily fixed. I select them all and I pop it over to overhead LX. And because I have show and snap others enabled and not show snap modify others, they're no longer selected because the active layer is LX positions and they're now on overhead LX. So I'm just going to make overhead LX active. So here we are. We have some information and we now want to show it. The default ATH file that you download does have some pre-made sheet layers on it. Unless you just want to quickly show something, I would recommend that if you are using that file to delete all of the sheet layers and start from scratch and make your own. I'll show you in a minute why I think that's a better way of working. But if you are quickly just drawing something up and you want to show it quickly, then obviously having some pre-made sheet layers is quite handy. However, if you're working in a referenced file, then your new empty file that you are referencing the ATH into doesn't have any sheets in it anyway, so you'll have to create new ones. And I have made a screencast on sheet layers and such as well. So in this one, I'm going to focus a bit more on the actual title block. So let's draw a rectangle around the information we want to show. Now it doesn't actually matter that this has a fill because I'm only using it as a definition of my viewport. But you could, if you wanted to, get rid of that fill here. But I'm just going to go to View and create a viewport. This is now asking me, do I want to use the selected object as the viewport's crop? So I press yes, and that means this is basically my window that I place onto my piece of paper. I'm going to create this viewport on a new sheet layer. That new sheet layer is going to be sheet 1, and the title of it is going to be, I'm going to call it backlight. So that's the name of the sheet. So for example, if you're showing different sidelight positions or different backlight positions, then the sheet title would be backlight or sidelight, and then the individual viewports would be which particular backlight or which particular sidelight or whatever it is you're showing. So the sheet title is more of a heading of everything that's on the sheet, whereas the individual viewports you should name according to what they are showing. So the drawing number and the drawing title, this is the individual viewport title basically. So I mean, here I'm going to call this mid-stage backlight. I'm going to use the scale of 1 to 50. And I'm going to leave the rest to be a default. So press OK. And if you look, we have now created a viewport on this sheet of paper. So one thing I would do first is have a look at what size is this sheet of paper. If you go to your file page setup, you'll see that it's currently set to ISO A0. Probably because I set a sheet in my design layer to be ISO A0 earlier. So this may not be A0 for you, but I'm going to set this to A3 because that's what I can print in the office. Press OK and you can see it's now actually slightly better fit. I will also make my crop visible so that my viewport has a nice little box around it, and then I'll put it somewhere nice on my piece of paper. Obviously this is, very nice. I've got my viewport here. It tells me what I'm looking at, but it's missing a lot of information like what kind of show is this? What are we actually looking at here? So from my dims and notes tools, I use my title block border tool. I'm going to place that in the center. And then I can choose a title block. Now there's different options here. In your VectorWorks libraries, you have all kinds of title blocks. So you have Spotlight title block, CITT, Spotlight title blocks, UCIT, Spotlight title blocks. There's an ABTT notation, ABTT title block. Have a look around, you know, which ones you like. You can use different ones. Let's go. I'm going to go for a Spotlight standard title block here under Spotlight title blocks and select it. So this is now going to give me this border with a pre-styled title block in it, which is why I can't actually edit any of these because these are defined within the style. If I want to edit them, I need to create my own or use an unstyled one. So press OK, and here we are. Now I have a border which is rather thick for my liking, but there you are, and a title block with some information in it. Now some of this information is pre-filled in. You can see the drawing title backlight. It's taken that from my sheet title. The sheet number is here. This is one of the reasons why I would recommend that you delete all of the pre-made sheets and start from scratch, because the pre-made sheets in our Ath drawing have the sheet numbers a bit messed up. So some of the sheet numbers aren't sheet numbers, they're actually sheet names. So you end up with a slight confusion about what's a number and what's a title, I think. Starting from scratch, obviously you'll have these sort of numbers in an order that you create them, and various other bits of information are around. If you want to edit any of this information, then here in the title block border section you can press on sheet data, project data, and various other bits and bobs. So let's have a look at our sheet data. So we can put in different pieces of information here: designed by, directed by, drawn by, and so on. One thing to point out is the dates. So you can see here the date in our current title block is the 7th of September. This is referring to this date here, today's date, this section date. So sheet data date. There is also a sheet data current plot date, which currently has no information in it. We could make that automatic and refresh and make it also the 7th. And we'll make this one October, just to make sure it's different. So you can see we've got two different dates here. If we press OK, you can see this one is now October. So it has taken the value from date rather than from the plot date. There is also another date in here. If we go back into our data and we select project data, you have the project date. So it's important not to get your dates confused. I would recommend that you use date. The reason is that you need to deliberately update this date for it to change. The current plot date, you can set to manual to also manually change it to whatever you want. But this refresh plot date button appears over here in your title block border section and your object info. But also when you do things like exporting a PDF, there's a function that says something like update all plugins, which will then automatically refresh your plot date. And while that can be very useful, it can also be very dangerous in that you may not actually have wanted to create a PDF with a new date when you're doing it. So there's a sort of a danger in the handiness of this, because if you're not aware of where it updates and when, you could accidentally create a whole set of sheets of PDFs with a new date without ever actually having made any changes, which then leaves you with two people in the venue having the exact same plans but with two different dates. So they're going to start wondering whether one of them is out of date or whether there's a difference or what's going on. So be careful about this sort of date thing, because you want to make sure that you know what you're doing. So my recommendation is use date, and always be very careful and deliberate about where you're changing it. I use it in the sheet because obviously sometimes you may update one sheet with maybe all your sidelights on it. You make a change to the sidelight, but you're changing nothing overhead. So the overhead sheet might retain an older date than the sidelight sheet, for example. Project data, the project date to me sounds a bit more like, you know, the date the project is happening rather than a date that refers to when the drawing was done, which could be confusing, and it's obviously has its uses as well. But for us, let's stick to the sheet data date. Okay. So if you wanted to change what something is referring to, if you want to make this your own, basically, at the moment you don't really have an awful lot of options to edit this. But you can do one of two things. Either you can edit this style. So in this drop-down box under style, you get an option to edit the style. That means whatever you're editing will apply to the style wherever it's used. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is you can convert this to unstyled, and then a lot more here has become possible to click. For example, you can edit the title block layout and mess about with it, and then later on, when you're finished with it, you can then create a new plugin style from this unstyled plugin. So that way you can basically use a pre-made style title block, do your edits, make it your own, and save it as your own custom one to be used elsewhere. So while you can also create title blocks from scratch, I would recommend that you just pick one that looks almost like the one you like and edit it to make it your own. It's much quicker. So if you go into editing your title block layout, you can then start editing what's going on. Even you can edit the lines where they go. You can edit what this information is being displayed, and also what the titles are of the information displayed. Now, if you look at these different bits of text, for example, drawing title is a text in title block, and in the title block data it says not link. So that means whatever that says here is what it will always say. It doesn't link to any other information. Whereas this one is also a text in title block, but under title block data, it says that the data type is a link value and the parameter is sheet data, sheet title. So this is where you fill in bits of information that will change depending on what it is. So, you know, the scale, for example, here is a link value with sheet data scale. So you can take one of these and adapt it to whatever you want it to be. I'm gonna actually change our style to one that I made earlier, which I have in my Lantern libraries. I have a CW title block border style, which is my sort of homemade style that I use on various drawings. I'm gonna say replace the information in the current. It should pretty much be the same, so it doesn't matter too much. But this is a style I made earlier. You can see my border is a bit thinner, and it has things pre-filled in, like for example my name and my Association of Lighting Designers number, and so on. So it's based on the old Spotlight title block, but with a few adaptations. And you're welcome to steal this from me and make your own, or steal the original and make it your own, whatever you want to do. I just want to show you a couple of things about this. So for example, you see in the scale, it has a scale at and then sheet size. So this sheet size is taken from the actual sheet size. This page is set up automatically. So whatever you decide it is, that's what's going to be on the title block. Now we have one viewport here that's in the scale of 1 to 50. And the scale here says 1 to 50. And that's obviously very clear. Whatever is on this piece of paper, if it's printed at A3, it's the scale 1 to 50. The reason I put the sheet size on there is because obviously if you have a PDF and then you print it out as an A4, for example, then things change. So I think it's important to put in here what the sheet size is meant to be, so that when you're looking at actual physical printouts, that you have an idea of whether you're actually looking at the right kind of scale or not. So if I had two viewports, let's just, I'm going to control drag this down to create a duplicate. On a Mac, that would be an alt drag. So now I have two viewports, number 1 and number 2. They're both the same, but for some reason I want one of them to be 1 to 100. Okay, so now I have 2 viewports on this piece of paper, this A3 piece of paper, and one is the scale 1 to 50, one is scale 1 to 100. In my sheet title block, in my scale, nothing's changed yet. So I'm going to go to my sheet data, and under scale, the reason it says 150 is it automatically populates with the first viewport it finds. Now if I press update, it is clever enough to understand there are now different viewports with different scales, so it's giving me a new default notation which says as noted. So I can press OK, and then it says as noted at ISO A3, which is of course much better than saying just one of these. So this is quite a useful function, I think, for clarity and making sure people don't print in the wrong size. If I was to delete this viewport and I go back into my sheet data, then I can just update the scale and it'll pop it back into what it was. Obviously, if you had 5 different viewports and they're all the same scale, then it will just keep that number there. Now, one thing that I think we should start doing, which we haven't really done much so far, is add our revisions in. So there's a handy way of showing revisions using a title block, which I'm going to add into this one. So this is my CW title block border style. I'm going to edit this style, but I'm not going to go into edit style because that just basically takes me to an editor for this block. I want to actually create a different style. So I'm going to convert it to unstyled and then edit the layout. In here, I'm going to steal some unlinked text from somewhere else, just so it's the same font and I don't have to faff about. I'm going to line this text up with the edge of this text and maybe pop it about there. And then I'm going to edit this one and call it revisions. Okay, I wish I'd lined it up before I wish I changed it before I lined it up. Come on, give me my handle. There we are. So let's line that up again. There, that should be all right. That should give me enough space as well. Now I'm going to control drag this and create 3 more bits of text. One there, and one roughly there. And then I'm going to link this one. So this one is going to remain an unlinked text. This one is going to be link value, and I'm going to choose revision data number. And this one I'm going to also link and call it revision data note. So that's going to be the actual text of my revision. And then the last one, link value revision data date. Okay, currently there's nothing filled into any of these, so they're appearing empty. I'm now going to exit this. So now you can see in my title block, I've now got this revisions here and nothing here. If I now go to my sheet data and go onto revision data, I can start filling in revisions. So number of revisions to display, I'm just going to say 4. I would say something between 3 and 5 should be enough, so you always see the last few changes that have been made. And I'm going to add revision date. That's the date I'm referring to in my title block, so that's the one that's important. It automatically fills with today's date. There's also a publish date. Again, this is a different date yet again, which you could use in your link data for another purpose if you wanted to. Descriptions, added backlight. Press OK. The numbering happens automatically. So this is my number A, date, and that's the description. And you can see it's beginning to appear above my title block. So let's add a couple of more things in. Change something. And another revision. Change something else. There we go. And then maybe another one, since we got 4. Changed everything. Okay. Okay, so you can see that in my layout, I haven't really given it enough space for 4 revisions. So if I press OK, that doesn't look too good. So let's go back into my layout. And all I need to really do is grab my revision heading and pop it somewhere sensible. So that means these are now filling. Now also, these text boxes seem to be just a tad small. So if I make them bigger, I should get a much better layout. So again, maybe also the date. Let's do this nicely. I'm only changing the bottom because the other ones automatically pop up there. No, not so far. There we are. So that should be big enough. So that should squeeze things. And then actually, I can take my heading back down a bit. Probably about there. Here we are. So now I get 4 revisions, and these will automatically move up as I change more. So if I put in my 5th revision, because I'm only displaying 4, it should bump my first revision off the list and only show the last 4. I think that's probably a really useful addition. And now that I have created this new unstyled title block, what I can do is under Style, go to New Plugin Style, and in my Cinderella Light Plot title block styles, that's where I'm going to put it, and I will call it CV title block with revisions. Press OK. So now this style is available in this drawing, and also I can import it into other drawings and use it. So you can create your own block with all kinds of functions. You can drag your own logo in. You could drag a show logo into it. You can make it your own. In my particular one, my name is always pre-filled in because I draw my own designs. If you were drawing if you were drawing plans for lots of different designers, then you'd obviously create a different section here. You can create drop-down menus as well. There's all kinds of functions you can put in to create your homemade title blocks.